Good evening, and thank you for watching. Well, it's great to be in the New Testament in our daily readings, isn't it? I mean, we've had 8 months of Israel's unfaithfulness leading then to their exile, and after a while, all of that disobedience is just hard to take. As we see rotten king after rotten king after rotten king in Israel, in Judah, it's not much better. Every now and then we see a decent king who reeled the people back into God, but most of the kings are just poor leaders. Especially toward the end there, when you see kings who are not just worshiping idol gods, but actually sacrificing their own children to them. It just wears you out. But now we've come to the New Testament where the greatest king finally shows up. The king descended from David, the prophet greater than Moses, this priest from the order of Melchizedek. Well, I don't want to leave the Old Testament behind just yet because there's a particular story in there that I would like to use tonight to kind of give us a reference point before we turn to Matthew chapter 11. It's the story of those 3 Hebrew boys who face the fires of execution. They have refused to bow down to the king's idol god. We know these men as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, offers these 3 one last shot to bow down. But the boys say what, in essence to me anyway, sounds like a prayer. They say, Nebuchadnezzar, our God is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, and he will deliver us out of your hand. But even if he doesn't, you need to know that we're not going to serve your gods, and we're not going to worship the image that you've set up. Boy, that's great faith. That they would say this in the midst of these dire circumstances where they are suffering persecution and are facing death. These 3 refuse to dishonor God. We exalt the name of God, they say, because he is able to deliver us, and maybe he won't, but either way, we're not going to dishonor him. Let me ask you a question. What happens when God in his sovereignty doesn't deliver? When he allows his people to go into the fire? When he allows his people to suffer and experience turmoil and maybe even to die? Now we come to Matthew chapter 11. John the Baptist is in prison and his days are numbered. John has angered the king by calling him out about his sinful marriage. He is facing execution. He's suffering persecution. And he's not going to get out of prison alive. He will be beheaded. So let's go to the text. This is Matthew chapter 11, beginning in verse 2. Now when John heard in prison about the deeds of the Christ, he sent word by his disciples and said to Jesus, Are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? See, in moments of suffering, doubt can creep in. When life knocks us down and holds a knife to our throat, we start to wonder, is God really for me? And if he is, then why am I going through this? Why am I suffering? Why is life just being drained from me? And as John sits in this prison cell, he's struggling. And he wants to know, Jesus, are you the one? Are you the Messiah the prophet spoke about? I'm about to walk into the fire, Jesus, and I have to know. I have to be sure. And we scratch our heads about this a little bit because we know that John was there at Jesus' baptism and in fact administered that baptism. He saw the heavens part. He saw the Spirit come down like a dove and light upon Jesus. He heard the voice of God declare, This is my beloved Son. John witnessed all of that. But his circumstances have changed. He's in a difficult situation. And his faith tank is running a little dry. And so he sends his disciples to ask Jesus, Are you the one? And folks, it's okay if we ask that. It is okay for us to pray, God, I'm hurting and I need to know for sure that you're still with me. I need to know that your promises are real. I need to know salvation is coming. And I need to know that even if these circumstances kill me, this cancer, this COVID, this old age that even if it kills me, I need to be sure that I still have a future with you. Church, it's okay to pray that prayer. And John, in his doubt, says, Jesus, tell me you're the one. Here's how Jesus answers. Go and tell John what you hear and see. The blind receive their sight, and the lame walk. Lepers are cleansed, and the deaf hear, and the dead are raised up, and the poor have good news preached to them. Jesus knows that John knows his Bible. And so he tailors his answer with the very words of the prophet Isaiah, specifically Isaiah 35 and chapter 61. What Isaiah said the Messiah would do, John, that's what I'm doing. Yes, John, I am the I am. And for me, it's interesting that Jesus leaves out the last couple of lines from Isaiah 61, verse 1, the part that says, I have come to proclaim liberty to the captives and the opening of the prison to those who are bound. See, I wonder if Jesus omitted that last line because he knows that John is not going to get out of prison alive. That John's not going to be delivered from the fiery circumstances, that he will in fact give his life for the sake of the name. See, all of us at some point are going to struggle with the question of why. Why me? Why am I going through this? What's going on here? Why me, Lord? And the reply of Jesus is, trust me. Put your faith in me, because I am. Look, some of us at Southern Hills are suffering right now. Maybe a lot of us. We have church family who are grieving the loss of loved ones. We have others who've been knocked down by COVID-19. We think about the elderly people in our congregation, many of whom haven't been able to attend a church service in person in almost 2 years now. How many more of us are suffering that we don't even know about? People who hurt every day with chronic pain, or maybe it's a rebellious child who's forsaken Jesus and embraced a lifestyle of sin. Maybe it's people who are fighting depression or trying to conquer an addiction of some kind, drugs or alcohol or pornography. People suffer in so many ways. And when we're suffering, doubt creeps in. And we want to know why. And Jesus answers, trust me. Just trust me. Because I love you and I care about you. And ultimately, I will deliver you. After the disciples of John leave, Jesus addresses the crowd of people who remain by saying this. What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed shaken by the wind? What then did you go out to see? A man dressed in soft clothing? Behold, those who wear soft clothing are in kings' houses. What then did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is he of whom it is written, Behold, I send my messenger before your face, who will prepare your way before you. Truly I say to you, among those born of women, there has arisen no one greater than John the Baptist. And yet, the one who is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he. From the days of John the Baptist until now, the kingdom of heaven has suffered violence, and the violent take it by force. For all the prophets and the law prophesied until John, and if you're willing to accept it, he is Elijah, who is to come. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. You see, the plan of God is moving along just fine. After all the years of Israelite disobedience, God has finally sent his Messiah. And John, the prophet, like Elijah, who is in fact greater than Elijah, has prepared the way for Jesus, the prophet like Moses, who is, in fact, greater than Moses. Moses delivered Israel from bondage to Egypt. Jesus delivered the world from bondage to sin. And to do that, he had to walk the same pathway John walked, the pathway of self-denial and suffering. And Jesus calls us, his disciples, to walk the same pathway. Jesus says anyone who would be my disciple must deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. Suffering is a part of discipleship, church, and we will all suffer on some level. Some more than others. Why? I don't know. But we must face the overwhelming evidence that Jesus is Lord and the promises of God are true. So trust Jesus in your suffering. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. Have a blessed week.